Good morning. Good morning, and this morning I want to talk about something that Sue P. brought up a couple of weeks ago about this quote that she had heard that of something that Sojun Roshi had said. So that's what I want to talk about today. And as Sojun was nearing his death, so Sojun was the abbot of the Berkeley Zen Center, and he also was our Honshu, which means that Daijaku and I were his students and received Dharma transmission from Sojun Roshi. So, and there's recently been a book that came out called Seeing One Thing Through the Zen Life and Teachings of Sojun Mel Weitsman. So the quote that Sue heard is a quote that's in this book. So I wanted to talk about that today. And one of the Sojun at the end of his life was doing these online dokasans, and I think he was doing them once a week, something like that, where people would go online and ask him questions. So dokusan's like practice instruction, where you go and you ask the teacher questions about that you're curious about your practice in your life. So this person asked him, has your attitude, he asked Sojun, has your attitude about death changed now that you know that you're dying? And Sojun said, I'm not able to hang on to anything. That's my secret. I believe my teacher when he said, don't get caught by anything. I really believe it. And then not only did I believe it, I started acting it out. So that's where I'm at. Don't get caught by anything. I'll read you the whole quote. I'm not able to dwell on something. The news is what the news is. My anger is what my anger is, and that's all. And I try to do what I can to assuage my and everyone else's anxiety. I don't have much anxiety. I'm going to die. I am on my way. What should I do? Worry about it? Everyone does this. Nobody escapes this. It happens to every single person that has ever lived. Why should I worry about it? What's there to worry about? Just follow the news. This is what I've decided. This is what I decided when I was young. I said to myself, I'm just going to live my life all the way up until the end. And then when it's time to go, I go. That's part of life. Life is death. So we experience it every minute. Here we are. Next moment, here we're not. And that happens on every moment. So that's what Sojun, the whole quote. So I'm going to take it apart and talk about each part of it. So the first part is Sojun said, I'm not able to hang on to anything. That's my secret. I believed my teacher, and his teacher was Shunryu Suzuki Roshi at San Francisco Zen Center. He said, I believed my teacher when he said, don't get caught by anything. I really believed it. And then not only did I believe it, I started acting it out. So he started practicing that, acting on that. So that's where I am. Don't get caught on anything. So I went back and looked at some Suzuki Roshi talks. And Suzuki Roshi said, not getting caught is to, quote, accept our life and become with surroundings. And later in the same talk, he said, the most important point is self-confidence to live in this world, to survive in this world as human beings. So what I understand him to be saying is that our life is unfolding right now, which is what Sojun was saying. And we want to have confidence to face that life. I think that's part of what practice is about, is it's cultivating this confidence kind of way, our path of how we can face our life with a kind of confidence. And not getting caught in wanting something that is not happening, in the sense that it's really upsetting you. That to not hang on to things that cannot be changed. So Sojun's saying letting go of this idea is how, letting go of something versus the ideas that we have about what this something should be. So he's talking about his death here. So he's accepting that this is going to be the time that he's going to die. He's accepting the fact that he's going to die, and I don't know exactly when he gave this talk, whether he's 3 months away from his death or 6 months away, but accepting the fact that, okay, now he knows that he has a life, that he's at the end of his life. And by the way, hearing this from Sojun, it doesn't mean that Sojun didn't have any preferences. Sojun did have preferences. He did have likes and dislikes, but he didn't suffer when it didn't turn out the way that his preferences might have wanted it to. So he's saying, accept this and don't get caught by this. Don't get caught by wanting it to be something different. So that's probably what Suzuki Roshi meant when he said in rather awkward English, the part about he said, become with your surroundings. So I think what he meant was become one with your surroundings. In other words, integrate yourself with the reality of your life as it's unfolding right now. So then Sojun said, I'm not able to dwell on something. He said, I'm able not to dwell on something. So this is something he can do. He said, he's not going to dwell on this. The news is what the news is. My anger is what my anger is. And that's all. So he says, I might not be happy about this, but I'm not going to dwell on it. And kind of, as we say in Zen, put head on head, add something extra to this. So not getting caught by the news of his death. I'm assuming that's the news that he's talking about here. Not resisting it. So he's saying, I accept having received this news. Sojun was 91 when he got ill. And he says, I think referring to his death, he says, it sounds like he was a little angry about it. He said, my anger is what my anger is, and that's all. So he did have a response to it. Sounds like his response was being a little miffed about the whole thing. Now, it could be that he was at Tassajara doing a practice period and he fell ill and they took him to the doctor in Monterey, and then he found out that he had cancer. So it's possible that he was miffed about the fact that he had to leave the practice period. That could have been what he was feeling. But he did clearly had some feelings about it. But he was accepting that he had feelings about it and not adding to that. That he said, that's the news. So it was very simple for him. At least that's the way he's presenting it here. So in the summer of 1965, Suzuki Roshi was at Sokoji Temple, and he was doing a Q&A session after a lecture that he gave. And a student asked Suzuki Roshi about anger. Now, Suzuki Roshi, according to Crooked Cucumber, had some anger issues himself when he lived in Japan. I don't know how he worked with that. But here he says, the student says to Suzuki Roshi, I keep getting angry and it doesn't go away. And I want to criticize someone, but I don't criticize them, but I still get upset. So Suzuki Roshi said, and part of his answer was a fairly long answer, if you think you should not be angry, you are caught by precepts. So what he's saying here is that the student was saying, there's a precept that says don't get angry. So if I get angry, then I'm like this bad person because I broke the precepts because I'm being angry. And so he says, so Suzuki Roshi said, if you think you should not be angry, you are caught by precepts. You think that you should not be angry, and that's not the precept, actually. So this way of holding on to this, like the precept is, okay, this is a way that that's not very skillful in the way that we respond to things. And you make the mistake of getting angry, or you have the experience of getting angry, but then take note of that, do whatever you're going to do around that, and let it go. You don't have to keep beating yourself up. So Suzuki Roshi said, when you keep it, he says, when you keep the precepts, keep the precepts. And when you violate the precepts, then that's not the precepts anymore. It's just a mistake. So I thought that was kind of interesting, his take on this. If you get angry and you do something that you feel like is breaking the precepts, you should take note of that, pay attention to that, change your behavior, and say to yourself, that was a mistake. But it doesn't need to be something that you're going to indict yourself for. So he says, if you're angry, note that you're angry, but you don't have to keep angry, keep on generating that. So let it go. Just accept that you're angry and let it go, and don't beat yourself up. Now, in Sojun's case, he says, well, he got angry and he just accepted his anger, which, for him, he didn't visit it on anybody. He acknowledges that he got angry, but he didn't have to do anything more than that. He says, it's okay to let go of everything that's extra around that. Do you know what I'm talking about? You get upset about something and then you say, okay, I'm upset about this, but then you got to generate more, oh, I shouldn't be upset. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. And then it spirals into all this other stuff instead of just saying, yeah, this is not particularly helpful. I'm suffering. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm whatever I am. It's okay to be those things, but you don't have to get caught up in the story around it. So, Suzuki Roshi said he said a lot, many times in his lectures throughout the course of, the years that he talked about not getting caught by thinking, not being caught by preconceived ideas. And interesting, he said, you should not get caught by fear. So I think this is kind of interesting. He said, whatever comes to us, whatever we face, we should accept and respond to it without fear, without getting caught by anything, any idea of fear. It is not easy to be straightforward. So he said, again, he says, you shouldn't get caught by fear. Whatever comes to us, whatever we face, we should accept it and respond to it without fear, without being caught by anything, any idea of fear. It is not easy to be straightforward. Now, I think this is pretty hardcore. You shouldn't have fear. We should never get caught by fear, because I think we do get caught by fear. But I think what's interesting here is that he said, it's not easy to be straightforward. So to be straightforward in our lives, to actually just be straightforward and see our lives as it is unfolding right now. And so that unfolding, I think, sometimes it includes fear. Sometimes it includes anger. Sometimes it includes grief. Sometimes it includes joy, but we're not talking about those emotions so much today. But, it includes things that probably emotions that we would rather not have. But he says, you have to be straightforward about how you approach this. And so don't get caught. And the way of not getting caught by fear is to be straightforward about fear or whatever the emotion is. So, Sojun heard these teachings by Suzuki Roshi. He was his student for many, many years, for decades, and heard Suzuki Roshi talking about this. So that means that he worked with these teachings, Sojun did, he worked with these teachings his whole practice life. And so by the time he got cancer at the age of 91, he had worked with a lot of these things when they were, being straightforward. He said, we looking at your life in this very straightforward way. So Sojun had been looking at his life in this very straightforward way for decades, and he had been taking small things, starting out with small things, right? Because it's good, we have to build our practice muscles. So you start out. So by the time he was 91, and he'd been practicing all those decades, when he got to the place where he found out the inevitable that we're all going to face at some point, we just don't know the when or the what, that he found out, yes, he's going to die from cancer. And so, he was very straightforward about his willingness to look at that and his feelings around that and not getting caught by that. So then Sojun said, and I try to do what I can to assuage my and everyone else's anxiety. So this is interesting because it seems like he's saying that actually he does have some anxiety around this. So it's kind of like, this is how we practice, right? We practice with feelings come up, we bring to our mind the teachings, we remind ourselves don't get caught, then we work with the places where we're caught and letting go, and then we're not caught, and then maybe we're caught again, and we work with the teachings, and then we're not caught. So it's this way in which we keep coming back to the teachings. So here he's saying, I'm trying to assuage the students' anxiety about my dying by being straightforward. And he said, I don't have much anxiety. So that kind of indicates he had a little bit of anxiety about this whole thing. Because, it's like we are going into that place that we have never been before. And there is an inevitability about it. And so I could see that there would be a sense of, I'm a little anxious about what's going to happen here. So he's saying, I try to do what I can to assuage my and everyone else's anxiety. And he said, I don't have much anxiety. I'm going to die. I am on my way. So this way of not getting caught, having the emotions, but not getting caught, not letting them push him around. There's this idea in Zen, in Buddhism, about the ox herding pictures. And in the ox herding pictures, the ox is kind of like, at the beginning of the pictures, the ox is kind of like crazy. But the thing with oxes is you can lead an ox around by putting a ring in their nose. This huge animal, you can lead around by putting a ring in its nose. So we don't want to be like an ox where anxiety is like the ring in our nose, dragging us around from one place to the other. So we want to be able to, in the ox herding pictures, ride this ox home, we say. You see the picture of the little monkeys riding the ox home playing the flute. But after he has spent a long time kind of working with this in his life. So Sojun spent that time doing that work. And that's part of the work of practice. So when Jaku and I, as I said before, is Deshi, and we would have these Deshi meetings every year with Sojun, and usually about 20 of us would show up. I think he had 30 some odd people that he transmitted. And we would show up to these meetings. And I remember one of the meetings before he got the diagnosis of cancer. I don't know if it was our last meeting or not, but Sojun said to the group, he said, my job now as a teacher is to teach my students how to die. So he said, my job, I feel like now, is to teach, to model how it is to die. So I think that is what Sojun was doing, is he was trying to model for everybody what he considered to be the right way to approach through practice this very momentous, if you will, occasion in our life. So here he's teaching people about death in this quote. He's working to teach us how to approach, how he's approaching his own life and how we can approach our own birth and death without anxiety. So he's not saying he isn't afraid, but he's saying, in some ways, what is the point of fear about this? What is the point of anxiety about this? Because there is an inevitability about this. So, and yet he's also saying to the students, he's saying, it's okay to talk to me about this. You don't have to be anxious about talking to me about this. You don't have to be anxious about that I'm going to die. Everything will be all right. At the end of the lectures that Suzuki Roshi gave, there's a little section, the last one is of a dialogue between Suzuki Roshi and some of his students in his office at City Center after he had found out that he had stomach cancer. I think he died of stomach cancer. And one of the things that Suzuki Roshi said is, he said, Buddha will take care of everything. So I shouldn't worry too much. Buddha will take care of everything. So I shouldn't worry so much. So this is a very faith-based kind of comment on Suzuki Roshi's part. Sojun doesn't seem to be talking about, at least in this particular talk, so much about being faith-based in this way of just sort of giving it over. But I think that's part of this letting go, is we can think about this as this just giving over to something that's bigger than us, just giving over to this universal totality functioning. This, what Suzuki Roshi is saying, just give it to Buddha. Let Buddha worry about it. Let the universe hold this for me so that I don't need to hold this. Interestingly enough, Suzuki Roshi also said, now I'm going to be a lazy monk, which I thought was kind of interesting. Now I'm going to be a lazy monk. I wasn't going to say that to you all because I thought maybe you shouldn't know that Suzuki Roshi said that. He said, now I can eat anything. The doctors, because before they thought he had hepatitis D or C. And so I guess they were restricting his diet. So he was saying, oh, good, now I can eat anything. And maybe when he was saying, I'm going to be a lazy monk, what the subtext of that might have been is, I'm not going to be here for you. I'm not going to be able to keep holding this position that I've been holding for you. And I think Sojun's also saying that when he says, you should not, I don't want you to be anxious about this, that this will also take care of itself, that this will work its way through and it will be okay. Suzuki Roshi, when he made those statements, it was in October of 1971. He died in December of that year. So he died pretty quickly after his diagnosis. He was 67 years old. Sojun was 92 when he died. So then Sojun said, what should I do? Worry about it? So he's saying, what should I do? Should I worry about this? He said, everybody does this. Everybody escapes, and nobody escapes this. Everybody does this. Nobody escapes this. It happens to every single person that has ever lived. What should I worry about? What's there to worry about? So he says, again, don't get caught. Don't get caught by this. Now, I noticed that Rihanna is here, and it's possible she might have been actually present online for this dialogue. So I'll be interested if she was and what she has to say about it, that she would have heard the tone of his voice and how he was actually saying this. Because I don't know exactly how he said this. He might have said it in the sense of, I'm saying this to myself as well as saying it to you. Or he might have been really settled with this and just been saying this to his students. Don't worry. I'm okay with this. This is what's happening. So then he says, just follow the news. I thought that was interesting. Just follow the news. I think he's saying, just follow the news of your diagnosis, of the diagnosis he received. At first, I thought maybe he was saying, just follow the news, like the news that you read in the paper. But I think he was talking about the news that he received. So, just go with what you're receiving and don't get caught by it. And Sojun said in his autobiography at the beginning of the book that when he first started sitting, and he started practice in his early 30s, when he first started sitting, he had a lot of pain in Zazen. And he said, pain becomes intense when you are attached to relief. At that point, one has to settle with no expectations and simply exist fully on each moment, on each inhalation and exhalation. So he was thinking and working with this kind of practice from very early on in his practice. So he had a lot of struggles sitting Zazen, according to what he wrote. He was in a lot of pain when he first started sitting. Sounds like he might have been pretty stiff. And so, he's saying, and he was just determined to do this practice. He really admired and loved Suzuki Roshi. And if Suzuki Roshi was doing it, I think that was like, I want to do this too. And so he really applied himself to this practice. I'm not suggesting from this quote, don't get caught on the part about pain. I'm not suggesting that we should all rack ourselves with pain. But the fact that he, wanted to do this, and what happened for him is that at some point he let go of wanting it to be something different. And when we let go of the wanting to have things different, there's a transformation that happens by letting go of that resistance, because we relax into whatever that is by letting go of that resistance. So that's what he's saying here is, at that point, one has to settle with no expectations and simply exist fully on each moment, on each inhalation and exhalation. So really being in the present moment, breathing in, breathing out, really fully experiencing this. What does the ground feel like? What does it feel like to breathe? What does it feel like to hear the birds? Really coming back to the present moment. So if we resist our life, this is getting caught. This is a problem. So Sojun resisted his pain while he was sitting zazen, and he was caught because he wanted his experience to be something different. And I think we all know what that feels like. We've all done that, wanting something to be different than what it is. But when he relaxed and accepted that, then his experience was okay. At that point, it was okay. So he was able to sit in the middle of this pain that he was having and not be bothered by it. So that's quite something. And I think that's what he means when he says, just follow the news. Just follow the news. Don't get caught. So then he ends this part quote ends with, this is what I decided when I was young. I said to myself, I'm just going to live my life all the way up until the end. And then when it's time to go, I go. That's part of life. Life is death. So we experience it every minute. Here we are. Next moment, here we're not. And that happens on every moment. You know, he might have been thinking about Suzuki Roshi's death. He might have been thinking about Suzuki Roshi's practice. And Suzuki Roshi died during Shishin, during a 7-day Shishin, Rahatsu. Kind of a perfect way to go, and for a Zen teacher. And you know, maybe at that point, Sojun said, I'm gonna just live my life all the way up until the end. And that really is our practice. That's what our practice is. Just live your life all the way up to the end. Just do this thing all the way up to the end. Whatever this thing is in each moment, just do this thing. So, you know, I think initially, this resolve of his was probably just an idea that he had. But this idea was developed through his practice. He didn't get caught by little things, or when he got caught by little things, he worked to not get caught. And then he didn't get caught by big things. And so he found some level of equanimity around the problems that arose through the practice he was doing. So, you know, I think clearly Sojun's saying, you know, death is not a problem, because we tend to think of death as being a problem. It's a problem that we don't want to have, you know, and he's saying it's not a problem. This is natural. This is what's going to happen to us all. So he says this practice is to live each moment, because of course, until I suppose those of us who are left behind perceive a person as being dead, they are totally 100% alive until we perceive them as being dead. So we, you know, their life may be continuing on. It is. They're still 100% alive or dead or whatever. They're 100% that. Our perception is they're 100% dead, but we don't know they're 100% alive. So it's like, this is that the practice to live each moment. That's what happened. You know, we read Shoji, Birth and Death, here on Wednesday mornings at Ocean Gate. Dogen wrote, in birth there is nothing but birth, and in death there is nothing but death. Accordingly, when birth comes, face and actualize birth. And when death comes, face and actualize death. Do not avoid them or desire them. So just face and actualize each moment in your life. Don't get caught. Don't get caught by birth and death. Birth and death isn't the moment that you're born, the moment that you die. It is those things, but it's also each moment that you take a breath. It's each moment that you drive your car. It's each moment that you talk to someone. It's each moment of your life is birth and death. There is a beginning and an end, endlessly, without beginning or end. So live your life each moment fully awake, as you know, as possibly as you can. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to have fear. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have pain or anger or opinions or grief or preferences. All of these things come for us as human beings. These are all part of being a human being. But we have to face and accept them, that we're having these feelings, and take a straightforward look at our lives as they are unfolding. And apply your practice to that. Is my response helpful? Do I need to let it go? Do I need to not get caught by this? So it's okay to have these experiences. You can't avoid them. But on the other hand, it's like, don't get caught by them either. Stay awake. So Sojun faced and actualized his death. He was trying to encourage his students at the end of his life. He was trying to teach his students how to die, how to live their lives each moment, and probably just pack that in, at the end for all of his students, because he loved his students. And so that was his practice. That's our practice. This is what waking up is about. So don't get caught by anything. Thank you.